So in this screencast, I'm going to talk about how to create timelines. In class, I showed how you can have a straight rectangular timeline and how you can use that to create a brush that brush can be applied to a circle or any other shape that you can think of to create a timeline. So first I created a new canvas, so you can just go to File, New, and here you can select the width and the height of your canvas. So once I've done that, I have my canvas here, and what I'm going to start doing is creating rectangles. So for example, consider, let's say I have 100% of some data, and within it there are multiple percentages. So I could make my rectangles proportional to that data that I have. So I can create, say, 4 rectangles for 100%, and they could each be 25% each, or let's say one is 40%, and the others are 20% each, right? So you get the idea how to use proportional rectangles to represent some sort of data. So I go to my rectangle tool here on the left side. So right now my ellipse tool is selected to create a circle. So if I just hold it down, my rectangle tool comes up. So if I click anywhere on my canvas, once I have my rectangle tool selected, I click it, and it comes up with this pop-up menu, and I can say my width is going to be, for the first rectangle, is 40 points, and my height is equal to be 10 points, or 10 pixels. You don't want your height to be too wide, too much, because what it will do is, if you use that height to create timeline, your brush is going to be that much thicker. So I click OK, and it gives me this rectangle. So if I select my selection tool, and I can see the rectangle, but I want this rectangle to be filled with a specific color. So I select my rectangle, and on the bottom of this tool menu here, you can see there are 2 colors, the white and the black. So the white is the fill of the rectangle, and the black is the border or the stroke. Okay. So right now I want to select my fill, and you go to the swatches, and I'm going to pick a color. Let's say orange. My border is black, so let's say I don't want any border. So I activate by clicking on the bottom here, and my border or my stroke is activated. And I can simply select this here with none. That means I don't want any border in it. So now if I click somewhere else, we can see I have my rectangle that's 40 pixels wide and 10 pixels in height. So I'm going to go and create my second rectangle. So again, if I click on it and give me 40 points, let's say my second data point is only 10%, so which means it'll be 10 pixels, and height remains the same. As you can see here, what it did was it created the rectangle as the same color that I had selected previously. So I wanted a different color, so I select my rectangle, or that'd be a square in this case, I guess, and I go back to here and says doesn't have any border, and I select my fill to activate it, and then I go back to my color swatches, and I pick it a nice sort of maroon. Okay, and then I select this using my selection tool, and I drag it next to the previous rectangle because I'm creating a timeline. As I'm moving it, it'll tell me whether they intersect. Okay, so once they shows me intersect, that means they're aligned next to each other, and I can let it go. So that's 50% of my data. Let's say I want one to be 30% next data point. So I select this to be 30, height remains the same, creates my rectangle, but right now you see the color is same as the previous rectangle, and I want to change the color to, let's say, a little bit of a yellow. Okay, so now I have my color, and I move it next, and it'll tell me when it intersects or aligns next to the previous rectangle, and there it is. So right now I have 40, 10, 30, right? So that's 80% of my data. So I need another rectangle that is 20. Click it, I change it to 20, click OK, and I want to change this color to darker maroon. Right, so I go back to my selection tool, which is right here, and drag it next to it, let me intersect. So there's my, straight timeline on a rectangle. Now to make sure that these are aligned, I can use my direct selection tool and just click anywhere outside those and drag and select all of them together. And on my top menu bar here, I want to select that they are vertically distributed at the center. So that means they're all aligned. The top and bottom edges are aligned. So I select that, that means they're all aligned. Next thing I want to do is create a brush. So on my right side, I see this brushes panel. Now again, I can activate, if it doesn't show up, I can activate it using window and brushes. Okay, again, window is where you basically decide which of the panels show up and which don't show up if you don't have enough room on your screen, which ones you hide. So my brushes panel shows up, I select all my rectangles of the timeline that I just created. I go to the right side and click on new brush. Okay, I want to select an art brush. When this menu pops up for a new brush, and I click OK. And you can name your brush. Let's say I want to name this timeline brush 1. Okay, and I click OK. I can leave options as they are and click OK. All right, so now that I have my brush created, you can see there's a brush here that I just created using this rectangular timeline that I just created. I can go and let's say if I wanted to draw a circle, so I go back to my on the left side and select my ellipse tool. Now if I want to draw a perfect circle, I hold my shift key down and then I just drag this, and let's say this is my circle. So right now, as you can see, it's filled with the last color I had selected for my bottommost rectangle. Let's say I don't want any fill in this rectangle. Okay, so I go back and I say no color in the fill. Okay, I want to make sure that my fill is selected is on top here, the bottom, and I go back and do that. Right, and now there's my rectangle. It doesn't have a border, it doesn't have a fill, and I can go and select my brush on this rectangle, and there I have taken my rectangular timeline and created a circular timeline using to represent data. Okay. And I can again manipulate the size of it. Again, if I want to keep it a circle, hold shift down and make it a little smaller. Right? So there it is. So the main difference between one thing that I should discuss as the selection tool and this direct selection tool is that if I have a circle drawn, okay, let me select a circle first. If I have my circle drawn, if I use the direct selection tool, it moves the whole circle, right? I can make it bigger, make it smaller, but if I select my direct selection tool and I click on the circle, it gives me these paths, right, which allow me to move individual components of this file. So I can create some funky looking shapes. Okay, so that's the main difference between a direct selection tool and just a selection tool, right? So direct selection tool, you can select individual anchor points and manipulate them. And I can go and select the selection tool and apply my brush to this, and so that brush stays there permanently. All right, so that's how you create timelines, by creating a brush